and just always make sure that you wet the ends before sticking it anywhere.
I have the same problem with my cat.
Well,
That's just something I like to say when it's totally inappropriate to do so. Hi, Ashley. Good evening.
good evening, Jay.
How do you do?
Doing all right, I guess. Yeah.
On the last show, you had spent about 3 days being out at work.
Right. Yeah.
And everything seemed to be going smoothly. Is that still the case?
Sort of, but not really.
Uh-oh.
The short version is that 99% of the people I deal with at work, totally fine, totally supportive, have been very open-minded, tolerant people.
Okay.
And I had mentioned about how, I guess, sort of leading up to my transition date, that there was sort of some of the discussions about the various restroom.
Mm-hmm. What we had called the tricky part.
Right, yeah, various accommodations, right. So on my first day at work, well, my transition day, I had that option, I guess, of going down to the workout room, sort of 9 floors down or whatever it was. And I was like, you know what? Screw it, I'll just use the ladies' room. And
Right.
so
Let me stop you there, because I had asked you if you talked to some of your female coworkers about whether they'd be comfortable
Right.
with that. And I think that you said that you
Yes.
did, but obviously you didn't probably have time to ask every single one of them.
I had talked with the women on my team, and they were, yeah, fine, yeah.
And also during a discussion with your boss and the HR guy, the HR kind of non-verbally, well, that's saying something different. The HR guy kind of said,
Wink, wink, nudge, nudge, say no more.
this is our official policy, and what you choose to do is entirely up to you.
Well, no, he didn't say it's entirely up to you. He said, and if you choose to follow your own path, that would be out of our hands or something.
I see. Okay.
Almost a sort of a nod to some sympathetic gesture or whatever you want to.
So that probably had something to do with your decision to say, hey, screw it, I'll just use the ladies' room on this floor.
Well, that and talking with all the women on my team, and also just
Yeah.
in real life or outside of work for the last 6 months or whatever, I've been using a ladies' room and not had any.
Mm-hmm. Like at the mall.
Yeah, sure. At the mall, at the Barnes & Noble, at the Whole Foods.
Yeah. And also, maybe more important than everything else, using the men's room would actually make you feel uncomfortable.
Well, it would not just make me feel uncomfortable, it would make other people feel uncomfortable, and as much as society has expressed tolerance and acceptance of my situation, you just never know. And
Mm-hmm.
the last thing I would want is for there to be some frat boy bigot or something. Not that all frat boys are bigots, I'm not saying that. In the men's room, and if I were to be there and, you know, receive harassment, physical or otherwise, that would be bad.
Mm-hmm.
In addition to feeling that it was appropriate for me to use the ladies' room, it also, in the simplest sense, was a process of elimination thing, that it was not an option for me to use the men's room, so I would use the ladies' room.
The only other option for you being a workout room on a different floor.
Right. Which, other than like over lunch and after work, goes basically unused. So, yeah.
Okay. So does that mean that you've been using the ladies' room at work this whole, what is it, eight days now?
On the day after we recorded our last episode, my boss called me on my cell phone and saying that he was down in the office of the HR guy who's on the 6th floor, saying, Ashley, could you come meet with us for a moment? I said, sure, I'll be right there. So, I mean, given that I wouldn't be called down and summoned in this type of situation unless it was something that was suboptimal, I kind of figured, well, I had a hunch about what it might be about.
Yeah.
And so it turns out that one of the female employees ratted on me, basically.
I'm going to guess it was one of the ones that you hadn't already talked to and asked if it was okay.
Right.
I didn't want to think that you had asked somebody and they said it would be okay, and it turns out they were lying to you.
No, in fact, I know exactly who it is because, at least on the floor where I work, it's mostly a development team, and then there's part of another floor, but there are a lot of men in this work environment. So the men's room gets its share of traffic, but the women's room is usually empty most of the time.
Oh, okay.
I would not, I mean, occasionally I might play someone in the next stall, but it'd often be just, I'd be the only person there. And so there was one occasion where I was washing my hands and I saw someone walk in behind me, and then she went to one of the stalls. But that was the only time I ever came across someone in which they would have seen my face.
And there weren't any other occasions where somebody might have seen you entering or exiting?
No. I mean, there may have been something where I was exiting while someone was in a stall, but they wouldn't know who I was, or, vice versa.
Right, okay.
So I met with my boss and HR guy, and they basically gave me a letter of demerit, or, just like if you're late for band camp, or, whatever the fuck.
Yeah, you're less likely to win the House Cup now for your Gryffindor classmates.
Right.
It says the word demerit. It doesn't say, official warning.
Well, it says, verbal coaching and counseling documentation. I mean, to cut to the chase, it says at the bottom here, where I'm supposed to sign and whatever, I understand that I'm employed at will, and that either company name or I may terminate my employment relationship at any time. I understand that failure to correct the above incidents can lead to further disciplinary action, including termination. But that's putting the cart before the horse.
So you're going to start using the workout room now, or what?
No, I'm not going to. No, what I'm doing is, so we're in an office tower with 15 floors, and the company that I work for is on 2 of them. And other tenants are on other floors.
Mm-hmm.
So I've just been playing kind of elevator roulette and pick a floor and use that the rooms are on that floor.
All right, sure. Which is just as if it would be you were at the mall. Yeah.
It so happens that different floors have been renovated, some haven't. So some of the bathrooms are kind of, I would guess maybe decades old, with that tiny small white tile and, gross blue stalls. Whereas the one on 15, my floor sort of has nice taupe stalls with sort of larger, prettier tile, and it's a nicer environment. So part of what I was doing was just trying to find a floor that may have also been similarly renovated. But it so happened that when I was in this, disciplinary meeting or whatever you want to call it, I again reiterated my concerns about harassment from other employees toward me, and concern for my own safety. And one of the suggestions made by the HR guy was, well, maybe you could just use another floor or something.
Oh, he actually said that? Okay.
But in a nonchalant, I'm being helpful kind of way, rather than the reality of, oh, you know what? You can't use those drinking fountains, but just use a drinking fountain on another floor. That'll be fine, right?
Sure.
It's the undertones behind it, that they think they're being accommodating. They probably think that they're meeting me in the middle, as it were. But it really makes me a second-class citizen at the company. And what it amounts to is, suppose there's a meeting coming up, and maybe I realize the meeting's going to be like a 45-minute thing, so I'm going to use the facilities beforehand. And so normally you could just dash off, use the ladies' room, come back. But in my case, of course, I have to go to the bank of elevators, press the down button, wait for the elevator to come, get in the elevator, go down however many floors, use the ladies' room, then wait for the bank of elevators on that floor, press the up button, wait for the elevator, get in the elevator and go up. And so it's a 7 or 8 minute round trip for something that should have been probably half that time. Each time through the cycle, it's like a slap in the face. It's not endearing me to the company. It's a reminder multiple times every day that the company does not respect who I am.
Mm. So the woman who ratted you out, do you talk to her on a regular basis? Has your relationship with her changed at all?
I talk to her very rarely. She's in another department, and we've met a few times at like the company potluck and so on. So I know who she is, and she knows who I am. And what irks me especially is that the way the letter is phrased, it's actually is upsetting other company name employees and blah blah blah. But in point of fact, I'm not upsetting, or I'm not. What? I was washing my hands and she walked past me. I didn't even have a chance to say hello to her.
Setting aside for the moment the idea that she didn't help write that letter, which she probably did not.
No, I don't.
You know, given people's varying degrees of acceptance, maybe she's not particularly accepting and still thinks of you as a man and would be upset to see a man in her restroom.
That may be the case, but suppose I was Don Draper and you were whoever the other guy is. And I felt uncomfortable because there were quote-unquote black employees in the restroom. If that were to be the case, that would be my problem. Because it is the right thing to do to accept employees, especially those based on attributes that are out of their hands.
Yeah.
That they were born with.
I wonder if there was any kind of content in the mini speech that they were giving to people when they were coming out on your behalf from team to team about preparing people to be particularly objective and open-minded about it. But you didn't get to hear those mini speeches, so...
Well, not terribly. I mean, I was present for the one given to my team. And, of course, they actually added these various items to the company's non-discrimination policy as far as sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression. And at least at the meeting that I was present for, they mentioned that there would be no tolerance for any kind of harassment for any of these attributes and so on. So, I don't know.
What do you think would need to happen in order for this other woman to change her mind about you?
I think that probably what would need to happen would be that for there to be her manager or whomever to make clear that I should be treated just like any of the other female employees with respect and dignity, and that should be the end of it.
Yeah.
I mean, they may have glossed over that part or
maybe,
or what have you. Yeah.
If I recall correctly, the main reason that they didn't want you officially using the ladies' room was because you didn't have a sex change, and maybe partially because you hadn't officially changed your name yet. But even if you had done both of those things, the sex change thing would be no business of anybody else's to even know about. So,
sexual reassignment surgery, which I tend to prefer as a less flippant term, but
sorry, I was just trying to be concise.
Oh, I understand. Or you could say SRS, but indeed that would be none of their business. And either way, of course, due to various standards of care, one typically has to present as one's gender for at least a year before undergoing SRS.
Oh, how interesting. I didn't remember that part. Okay.
Right, which is in some ways discriminatory in and of itself, which we can talk about in a bit if you want to. But so that means that at minimum, because I'm living full-time as this gender now, at minimum it would be 1 year from now.
Okay, so they start from a work transition date?
Well, it's what they call full-time. So it's not that you're doing it presenting as a gender part of the time. It's all the
I
time.
see. If, for example, you had started your transition at work, but then took a while to tell your friends, that would be the same situation. You wouldn't be full
Right,
time under those circumstances. Okay.
right.
So switching topics, the last
Yeah,
time we talked, you still weren't sure how you were going to ask your parents to call you Ashley.
right, right. So,
But
and I
since then,
was,
you've seen them.
yes. And so just to kind of give a brief recap, I was struggling because I wanted to ask them to call me Ashley. And normally with other conversations with other people, I would be more broad about it, more flexible. I might
Hmm.
say something like, "When you're comfortable, I'd like you to call me Ashley."
Right.
I was wary of using that phrasing with my parents because I it seemed likely they would just use that as an out and say,
Mm-hmm.
"Oh, well, we don't feel comfortable, so we'll just call you by your birth name."
Mm-hmm.
And so at the same time, I didn't want to necessarily be as direct about it to say, "Please call me Ashley," just since I don't want it to seem like I'm making demands or I want it to be something that they would feel more comfortable accepting. I didn't want it to be confrontational.
Mm.
The wording I ended up going with was, "I would like it if you would consider calling me Ashley."
Oh.
So that that meant sort of two things: that they could theoretically say, "Sure, we'll do that," even though I thought that was basically not a chance that would happen.
Mm-hmm.
And on the other hand, it could be perhaps the more likely scenario would be they would say something like, "Okay, we'll give that some thought,
We'll
and
consider
we'll
it.
see." Right, we'll consider it. Yeah. And then what that means is that it gives me the opening that I could potentially bring it up, I don't know, a few months down the road and say, "Have you given some consideration to that?"
Mm.
Or, as opposed to simply saying, "Please call me Ashley," which then that kind of, if they decline, then that's the end of it.
I see.
Right. So I asked my parents that. They were both here, and just at my dining room table. We're all kind of sitting around after dinner one evening, and I asked them, "I would like it if you'd consider calling me Ashley." And my dad, he says immediately, "No." And a moment later, he adds, "We'll call you by the name we gave you."
Oh. So maybe kind of an ego thing going on there.
I don't know if it was an ego thing or, I mean, what irked me is that at the least they could have humored me. They could have said, "Oh, we'll think about it." I mean, even if supposing they had no plans whatsoever to go along with it, if they were kind of more accommodating, they could have at least pretended to think about it,
Yeah.
or
Now, the fact that he responded immediately makes me think that he was sort of waiting for it.
He may have been, because I had been talking in the weeks prior about my transition of work and how people would be calling me Ashley at work. And so even though I had not expressly asked them to call me Ashley up until that point, it shouldn't have been a big surprise.
Yeah.
And I think with my dad, maybe he still thinks that this is a phase or something and that he wants to, I don't know, discourage whatever.
Maybe. But they've been living with this knowledge for a year now.
They've been living with the knowledge that I'm trans for a year, but it's only probably been the last few months in which I've brought up that other people would be calling me Ashley.
Oh, sure. Well,
And normally people would kind of just catch on or sort of get the idea of those kinds of things. But with
yeah.
my parents, they probably think that I'm one of the first trans people that they know, even though they've probably met other trans people and just weren't aware at the time.
I would think for most people, the name change would be the most benign part, or the easiest to cope with, because people change their name all the time, for any reason. It's like getting a tattoo for some people.
If I changed my name from one male name to another, that'd probably be one thing. But
Do you think
well,
so?
even that would probably be tough. But just
Yeah.
I think changing my name is maybe more straightforward for other people, but for a parent, it's probably hard.
I think it harkens back to the idea that they feel responsible for you, even though you've been an adult and self-sufficient for a long time.
Possibly, or just the idea that I'm rejecting their
Yeah.
upbringing or
Their
what have
DNA.
you. well, I certainly reject one of those chromosomes. But
Yeah. Well, that must have been
so
devastating.
it was. It was really heartbreaking because, well, I'll back up a moment. So my parents arrived the Friday afternoon, and I had taken the day off just so I can do some last minute cleaning up around the place and so on. I thought long and hard about sort of the outfit I'd be wearing, what kind of makeup I'd be wearing. And I intentionally, I mean, I still had my eyeshadow and eyeliner, but it was sort of a lighter kind of makeup approach. It had all the pieces to it, but it wasn't
Mm.
bold or anything like that. Because I didn't want it to be a confrontational thing.
Okay.
And so they pull in, and the doorbell rings, I open it, and my parents walk in, and my mom says, "Oh, birthday, you look a little bit different." And I was thinking, okay, I mean, that was actually much more benign than I was.
Yeah. She could have gone with,
Or what are you doing? Or you'd go change right now.
Oh,
Or
well, it sounds like
whatever.
they know better than to think they can actually control your actions at this point.
I don't know. And then we later went out to dinner that evening, and I wore attire appropriate for the restaurant that we were attending, sort of somewhat more dressed up than what I was wearing just during the day, which was like a t-shirt and jeans.
Well, don't be coy.
But
What did you wear to the restaurant?
a button-down shirt that was, I guess, sort of indigo colored, maybe between royal blue and
Mm-hmm.
navy kind of color. And I also wore some black flared pants, I believe,
Okay.
and some black leather flats.
Okay. So it's not like you were busting out the little black dress or even a skirt.
No, and that as well was intentional, but it was nonetheless clothes that a man would not wear.
Sure.
But as we were getting ready for dinner, and I changed into my attire for the dinner and so on, and we had a glass of wine before dinner and chatted a little bit, but they never had any snide remarks or anything. I mean, I was kind of almost expecting in the weeks upcoming to the trip that they would say something like, "Oh, you should change that shirt," or do you really want to wear that?" Or I mean, I wasn't even able to rule out if they would feel too embarrassed to go to the restaurant with me.
Right.
And so I kind of had a plan B in the back of my mind that if on the off chance they didn't want to go to the restaurant and be seen with me, I would just make dinner at home. I had that plan B because I'd rather than go change and then go out, because that would kind of cancel all the progress that we've made.
Okay.
So to get back to the conversation about the name, so this was after that dinner that I had this talk with them. And I don't know if I'd say optimistic, but certainly feeling a little better about things, that I wasn't expecting them to just be on board and everything else, but maybe they would give me the old, "Oh, we'll think about it," or what have you. And so it was not only just heartbreaking on its face, but in the light of some of how they had seemingly been accepting before.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, I'm under no illusion that they were necessarily stoked about the clothes I was wearing, but at least they didn't voice their objections.
Right. And as far as you know, there were no dirty looks.
Yeah.
Maybe this is just having come from my own family, but I still think that there's maybe ego is not the right word, but
Pride?
sure. Yeah, I think they spent a whole long time thinking about what your name would be and would feel disappointed if it were changed. Given that reaction.
So wait, there's one more thing about that.
Okay.
So since that conversation with them, they have rather conspicuously been using my first name much more often.
Oh, really?
My birth name, I should say. Like, so and so, could you pass the salt, or whatever.
Instead of just yeah.
Right. I don't know if they're trying to reassert their I mean,
Maybe a little low-level brainwashing.
maybe, or just try to convey the idea that they really don't like this idea
Yeah.
of me choosing a new name, even though ship's kind of sailed.
Did you talk to them about how you plan to make it official? Changing your driver's license and
I
whatnot?
think that did come up. I mean, I think my dad did ask something like, "So do you plan on changing your name?" And I said, "Yeah, I think I'll do that at some point, maybe next year sometime."
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that helped or hurt things as far as
Mm-hmm.
their point of view, but yeah.
Well, I'm going to keep hoping they come around.
Yeah. Yeah.
In the meantime, given that they did not react favorably to that, and you're going to see them on Thanksgiving, has that influenced your very far thinking ahead plans?
It has actually, because before this recent visit from my parents, I was kind of assuming the worst, or at least something that was not going to be great. In the sense of that I would open the front door when they came to visit and they would immediately have frowns on their faces and everything else. And so when I was coming to visit for Thanksgiving, I wasn't sure if maybe I would have to do that in drag.
Oh.
Right. So I wasn't quite sure about that. But now what I'm thinking is I'm going to be dressed appropriately when I go to the airport and everything else. So that's actually I'm kind of happy about that, actually.
Good.
Yeah. On the other hand, I'm dreading what the TSA does, just since,
Yeah.
I mean, because honestly, it's like a lose-lose thing, because if I put one gender down on my ticket, then it doesn't match what my piece of plastic says. If I put another gender down, then it doesn't match how I look.
Actually, I looked that up. I can't quote it to you verbatim, but there is stuff on the TSA website about gender identity and how it has to match your official documents. So you can look that up. I hope that the ratio of supporters to detractors is keeping you going and keeping you in a positive attitude.
Yeah, it is. And I've heard from a few more sort of aunts and uncles, and everyone I've heard from has been very supportive. And so as far as people who are going to be there at Thanksgiving, I think there's a good chance that a good portion, perhaps even a majority of them, will be completely supportive. So then
I'm imagining a situation where people are gathered together and one of them, your parent might say, "Hey, can you go get birth name to come out here?" And they'll be like, "Who?"
Or they might say, "Oh, don't you mean Ashley?"
Right.
And so
depending on how sarcastic and
right, yeah. No, that would be fantastic, because I would not be the one to necessarily be the one to correct my parents just yet, if only because I don't want to alienate them. But if someone else were to, then that's awesome. Yeah.
Okay, that's cool.
Okay, so you had mentioned maybe 1 or 2 shows ago about how you were editing and how you're sort of yelling at yourself, "No, you don't get it yet. You don't get it yet." Right. So what I was curious about was which aspect of it was it that you were not getting, and then what was the tipping point that allowed you to get it?
Okay, so what I wasn't getting was the idea that in order to be out at work, you had to actually have the company tell the rest of the company that you were a woman. I thought being out at work meant everybody knew.
And then I just show up one day dressed like this?
Pretty much. At the time, I thought that being out at work meant the people you would deal with on a daily basis would start calling you Ashley and treat you as a woman, etc. And that everything else was, as you might say, sort of ancillary. I didn't realize that documents would have to change and that there would have to be a policy and team by team meeting. And I certainly probably wasn't even thinking about the bathroom situation, but I might have just assumed that you would start using the ladies' room because everybody knew that you were Ashley now.
Yeah. In a reasonable society, yes.
What frustrated me about my past self was that I was asking stupid questions like, because you kept saying, "Well, I'm not yet out of work." And I'm like, "Well, you almost are. You've told 9 out of 12 people." That's out, right? So, I mean, because that's all it took when you came out to me as a friend.
Right.
Was saying it out loud.
Yeah, sure. I see.
I guess since I never had to go through anything like that at work, I didn't really have any idea what was involved.
Oh, I see. what turned you around? What was your tipping point that got you to where you are now?
I'm sure it took at least 2 conversations, but it was probably the point at which you said that I talked to my boss and he said, well, we'll have a meeting with the HR guy soon.
Oh,
I'm like,
okay. Right.
oh, this is actually kind of a process.
Yes.
And then I started feeling frustrated on your behalf about how long it was taking because I imagined it would be 3 days at most. I mean, how long does it take to change email addresses? It takes about
No, that's changing
30
email address
seconds.
is the easy part.
Yeah. And then when you started talking about the spiral-bound HRC documents and printing them up at FedEx office and whatnot, I'm like,
Right.
geez, oh man, 68 pages.
Though some of that is sort of background on what
Mhm.
transgender means, and it's sort of a one-stop shop kind of thing for someone who might not really know anything about that.
Mhm.
Well, that's fascinating, Jay. I was glad I could ask you a question now.
Sure, I'm open for it.
Yeah.
I have a couple questions. I think the answers might be short because I think they both might be no.
Okay.
Have you given any consideration to picking up some girly glasses?
Yay, kind of, yeah.
Okay.
Well, so I had appointment at the eye doctor about a month ago, just to kind of get my prescription updated and everything else. And I wear contacts most of the time,
Right.
so I also ordered some new contacts at the time.
Mm.
And Dr. Spock is really cool because you say, "Can I get a copy of my prescription?" He says, "Okay, sure. Here you go. You're gonna order glasses online? Good for you." Or whatever. He's totally open to that. You don't have to kind of dance around the bush or whatever.
Oh, good.
So I have my eyeglass prescription, and I found a site online that has some frames, some from Lisa Loeb, as it turns out, who you had suggested.
Yeah. Well, I knew she
Yeah.
had a line of eyewear.
Right. I didn't actually know that until I started searching around. But yeah, so she has her line of eyewear, and the part I'm trying to figure out is there some way where I can order a given set of frames and have whatever that same company is put the prescription in there? Or is it that I have to order the frames and then go to like a stupid brick and mortar eye doctor and they take their cut and whatever middleman nonsense?
Yeah.
And yeah,
If they don't explain that on the website, then I have to assume the worst. Which is a
probably,
shame.
yeah. So I found some that look enticing, but it's just a matter of figuring out the logistics of, okay, how do I get glass in there that's going to allow me to see well?
Okay.
Yeah.
And then this might actually sound like a really stupid question because there's no logic to it whatsoever. But
That's all right.
after you came out to yourself, did you find that your liquor habits changed at all? Because there's the phenomenon that people refer to as the girly drink. Whereas in the past, you were sort of a wine and beer person.
It's not that my drink habits terribly changed, no. But in general, after I'd come out to myself, I guess allowed myself to be more open-minded just in general about things.
Yeah.
Like, say I saw a pink shirt at the Gap or something. I like pink a lot. And maybe before, I'd be worried about, is that manly or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's just like, fuck it. I like that shirt. I'm going to buy it. And
Okay.
who cares what people think about that? So I think in terms of certainly clothing, I don't feel like I'm kind of pushing that to the side anymore. And as far as drinks and so on, yeah, I'm kind of open to whatever other drinks. It so happens that sometimes the quote unquote girly drinks are not the cheapest ones because they've got like 5 different liquors and an umbrella and
Right.
whatever else in there. So, but yeah, I'm open-minded to that kind of thing. Yeah.
But you
sure.
didn't find yourself having any urges to like, I'm wearing a skirt. I'm going to get a whiskey sour. Or like a Mai Tai and a Sea Breeze or whatever they're called. Cranberry, whatever. Anything with cranberry is a girly drink.
Oh yeah, like a
I've
crampini.
Yeah, I mean, like, I'll drink it. I apparently really dig girly drinks, but I don't care what people think of me. So,
Well, yeah.
I've got that going for me, which is nice.
Yeah. Well, plus, if someone, just in general, if someone cares about what drinks you're drinking, they're not the type of people I want to be hanging out with.
And I was hesitant to ask the question, even if just because I know that you tend to avoid sugar, and it tends to be a large ingredient in the quote-unquote girly drink anyway.
Yeah.
Speaking of girly things, as we
Yeah.
almost always are, would you like to teach me something girly?
Sure.
Good.
So as it turns out, on the last episode, you'd asked me about how many nail polishes I had.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
You estimated about 60, I think?
Right. So this evening I thought, well, Jade asked me, I'm kind of curious anyway to know his official number. So I put them all on my dining room table in groups of 10, and I counted them.
Okay.
And to make it a fair fight, I excluded any top coats, I excluded base coats, I excluded crackles, I excluded mini bottles. So these are just full-size, regular bottles of polish.
Okay.
And including the one I just bought a few days ago, I have 105.
Wow. Where do you put them all? Holy crap.
In lots of little like Rubbermaid type containers or just like under my sink in the bathroom.
What's the most prevalent color?
It's probably shades of purple.
Okay.
I like purple a lot.
Interesting.
Because there are lots of different ways to do purple, because you can do sort of an orchid, a light color, you can do sort of like a royal purple, and you can have purple with glitter, purple with shimmer, matte
Purple with
purple.
crackle.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
So, girly bits then.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I got 2 jobbies, one of which is nail polish.
Oh, speak of the
Yeah.
devil.
So this is number 105, or whatever.
Ah, okay.
This is actually the very nail polish that I wore during my parents' visit. And I kind of thought, I thought quite a bit about my parents' visit in general, but I thought a lot about what polish I'd be wearing on my nails. I wanted something that was, I don't want to say conservative, maybe, something that wasn't plain Jane, but I didn't want necessarily something with all the glitter and whatever, just because I'm trying to...
Am I right in thinking that the last time you were in personal contact with your parents, you were simply wearing like a top coat to make them a little bit shiny?
Right.
Okay.
So this will be the first time they've seen my nails painted. Yeah.
Is it also the first time they've seen you wearing a bra?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah. Though the last time I saw them in person, I did not have development to the extent of needing a bra. So that was not something I was omitting. It just wasn't present yet. So this color is actually from Orly, and it's called Night Owl. And it's from their Birds of a Feather collection.
Okay, good.
And
I was hoping with a name like that they would start a bird motif.
yeah. So they have all kinds of stupid bird puns. Night Owl is one of the less bad ones, but at any rate, so here's sort of the bottle, and here's sort of I don't know if you could sort of see my nails, but so it's sort of a taupe color, but with a slight maybe shimmer or / mini glitter to it.
Yeah, it looks sparkly.
Yeah, taupe is a fairly conservative kind of color, but then it's a kind of like a little wink with the shimmer. It's not just plain Jane polish.
Okay.
So I'm actually really pleased with this, and I've gotten compliments on it, and I can totally recommend it.
Nice.
Yeah. And so that was Night Owl, which is Nite, and then owl, like the bird.
Mm-hmm.
And the other item I have, which was actually something that you brought up, although I'm not sure if it was facetiously or otherwise last time.
Huh.
Yay, cotton swabs!
Oh, yeah.
So, if you're putting on eyeliner on your lower lid or upper lid, and if some of it ends up dissolving and getting a bit into your eye, which is not a poisonous thing and can just happen occasionally, it may collect near your tear duct, and that may, if you're looking very closely, it may be a little bit
okay.
unsightly. But what you can do is you can take a cotton swab, and the important part is to run it under the faucet first to get it wet on each end.
Okay.
Because what that'll do is it'll decrease the flyways of all these little fibers of cotton because you don't want those getting stranded in your eye, because then you'll be even worse off.
Yeah.
But once it's wet, though, you can just, pew, pew, and then you can even flip it around if you need be, and so on.
Okay.
And so typically, I'll run it under the water, use it, but I always try to use one side for one eye and one side for the other eye, just so that there's no cross whatever from one eye to the other, just in case.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love those drawings on the back of the Q-tip box. And I imagine they were trying to describe the thing that you just described, because the pictures, they may not be in your box, were just so vague. And there were drawings, and it was like Q-tip on your cheek, Q-tip on a baby.
You had
very pointedly avoiding Q-tip in your ear, which is when I use them every single day. Deal with it, Kraft or whoever owns you, Johnson & Johnson.
Well, no, because these are Johnsons and these are not Q-tips, so Q-tip might be Unilever or whatever. But anyway, so you'd mentioned about, hey, these aren't Q-tip brand, and indeed these are not. These are Johnsons, and I found that these are actually better than Q-tips.
Oh.
Because, and this is maybe just me overthinking things or what have you, but they have a denser set of cotton on each end.
Yeah.
It's not as loose. Because even once you wet each end, if you're using, say, Q-tip brand, you can still get strands of cotton that occasionally come off in your eye, and that's no good. But these, it's fairly dense. There's not a lot of strands kind of floating about.
Right.
And so these work very well. So these are Johnson's pure cotton swabs.
Awesome.
And oddly enough, these are actually kind of hard to find, at least around where I live. Normally you'd think you go to Target or whatever.
Right.
But it seems that most stores seem to have two brands of cotton swabs. They'll have Q-tips and then they'll have the store brand.
Okay.
And usually the store brand is just as rubbish as Q-tips.
Mm-hmm.
But these I found, of all places, at Walmart.
Okay.
And normally I don't like to shop at Walmart, but in this case I make an exception.
All right, fair enough.
So, yeah, and this is, of course, this is a 525 count, and it's like $1.99 or something, so it lasts friggin' forever.
Yeah.
But, yeah, so very handy, and I definitely recommend seeking out Johnson's brand over other brands of cotton swabs.
Okay.
Yeah, and just always make sure that you wet the ends before sticking it anywhere.
Thanks for the girly advice and the girly story. I hope things get easier at work, and either way, I'll be around to talk to you more about it in the near future.
Yeah, that sounds awesome.
So, good night, I guess.
All right, good talking to you, Jay. Bye.